Open war in the German cabinet over the country's immigration policy. Angela Merkel's refusing to back down. Will she end up being forced out? We'll ask one of her MPs and ask what Europe does about immigration now. It's taken months for Angela Merkel's government to take shape, but now a tense dispute which goes right to the heart of Europe's biggest problem is threatening to tear it all down. At its heart, this statistic: of the nearly 4.5 million asylum applications in the EU in the last 5 years, over 40% have been made in Germany. The Chancellor has fallen out with her Interior Minister over the immigration policy that made her name. Merkel has stood firm against unilateral moves to turn refugees back from Germany's borders. Horst Seehofer from the junior CSU party in her coalition has urged her to back down, while the standoff echoes the deepening divisions across Europe over how to handle the vast number of migrants and asylum seekers heading to the continent. Today, the French President Emmanuel Macron and Italy's Prime Minister Conte called for radical change to the EU policy. It was the policy that made Merkel and forced the world to see her country in a different light.
EU member states must share the responsibility of asylum-seeking refugees. Germany is a strong country. Our economy is solid, our labour markets are robust, and we even have the capacity to take in more skilled workers.
70 years on from the horrors of World War II, Germans were reborn, re-envisioned as a nation that welcomed foreigners to its shores, opened their doors and gave handouts to those in need. It won Merkel respect from many in the international community and secured her Time Person of the Year. But it was a policy that would divide Europe and left many furious. The German invitation encouraged many to attempt the long trek across Europe through Hungary, Slovenia, where the governments were much less sympathetic to the refugee cause. And the rise of new populist governments in Europe, Italy and Slovenia itself most recently, have been in large part a response to the refugee crisis their countries felt was out of control.
Let me make it absolutely clear, Europe will not be able to carry this burden on her own. If there is no change in the current trend, Europe will be destabilized.
When 600 or so migrants got stranded in the Mediterranean last week, Italy, following the mandate of its electorate, said no thanks. Malta, the same. And now Germany itself, once seen as the new Jerusalem, is facing that same battle. Merkel's Interior Minister, from a sister party in her coalition, wants to turn back refugees at the German border. The Chancellor herself is refusing. 2/3 of Germans say they want refugees turned away. 53% say Merkel hasn't managed the influx well, but 64% approve of her overall job performance. Wolfgang Schäuble, Bundestag President, is acting as cabinet mediator.
The management of migration is one of the biggest global problems for the Western world.
The question right now may focus on Germany, Merkel and her own political survival. But don't be fooled into thinking it's about one leader, one party, one country. The right of an individual state to control its borders and that human obligation to help those in dire need are on a collision course that is reshaping the politics of the entire continent. So what happens now? It's quite a big question, that one. I joined from Baden-Baden in Germany by Kai Whittaker, an MP in the Bundestag from Angela Merkel's CDU party, one of her MPs, in other words. Kai Whittaker, it's very nice to have you on the programme. When you put that figure into context, Germany accepting 41% of all asylum applications for the EU in the last 5 years, it is clearly well-meaning, but politically a disaster, isn't it?
No, it just shows that Germany is not only the biggest country in Europe, but also one of the most attractive ones, because we have a growing economy now in the 10th year of Angela Merkel's government, and that is the very reason why so many people try to get to Germany.
But you must be concerned with what it has done now to your own share of the vote, seeing the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, rising up. You can't pretend this has nothing to do with the immigration policy. It's caused a backlash, it's caused division, and German people are tired of it, aren't they?
Well, don't pretend it is a controversy, and it's putting pressure on Germany, on German politics. And yes, we need to solve that migration crisis, but Germany won't solve that on its own. We need a European solution.
But do you think maybe her interior minister has got his finger on the pulse right now? Is Chancellor Merkel in trouble?
Well, we are all in trouble if this goes horribly wrong next week. So everybody needs to think quite carefully over the weekend what to do next. Europe needs a stable German government, and it would be foolish to end this coalition. So I hope we can resolve the conflict by the end of next week.
Do you think that's where it's actually heading? You sound concerned.
Well, we are looking forward to a conference of the CSU on Monday, where they will decide what to do next, and potentially a parliamentary group session on Tuesday. And then we will see how things unfold.
I'm going to push you on this one. Do you think that Angela Merkel can survive this? It is a big political test for her.
Well, she can survive this because she made clear that this is a question of principle. Is Germany turning away from multilateral agreements among Europe and going into a national direction? She thinks that's the wrong way to go down, and that's why she fights for her legacy.
Sure, but fighting for your legacy is not the same as political survival. You know what the summer's going to look like. You know that more boats will be in the Mediterranean. There will be optics of more people trying to land on Europe's shores. Do you think that Merkel will last the summer?
I don't see why not, because we have achieved quite results in the past 3 years. We brought down the number of refugees coming into Europe and into Germany. We are not quite there where we want to be. That's why we need a European solution. That's why we also need to be better on national policies. But that's now up to decide in the next week.
Let me ask you very briefly, do you sense that failure to properly sort this out is what is pushing people towards the populist movement right across Europe?
Sure, some people have the impression that we don't have a grip on this problem, and we must do everything to seize control over the situation.
Kai Whittaker, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us. Let me bring in Nina Schlick. She is the European political commentator from the Rasmussen Global organisation. Just tell us, Nina, your sense of what sources inside the German government are telling you, because we heard from Kai there, very straight but clearly concerned and limited in what he's actually able to say as one of her MPs. What is your sense of what's going on now?
So obviously my sources in Berlin are saying that the situation is very fraught. It's on tenterhooks. Nonetheless, having said that, the cardinal rule in German politics is never underestimate Angela Merkel. That is the rule since 2005. People have been saying that she's gone for about 13 years. Clearly, the interesting issue here is that her interior minister is also the former minister-president of Bavaria, that is the state in Germany that bore the brunt of the migration crisis in 2015. At a certain point, you had 10,000 people a day crossing into Bavaria's borders. Bavaria is facing a state election in October. It's in the CSU's interest to be very hard on migration policy because they are afraid they might lose their absolute majority in those state elections, and the AfD is going to sweep up a lot of the votes.
So who's going to blink then? Is the Interior Minister prepared to concede, or is she going to help him out?
It'll be very interesting. So this poker that the Interior Minister Seehofer is playing, the ball is really in his court. Because if he blinks, that would probably mean that the government falls. And we've already had a very, very difficult period of coalition building. I don't think the electorate wants to see a return to new elections. There's no indication that you'd have a different result if there were to be a new election. So I think the question question is, will the CSU blink on the understanding that it would cause political instability in Germany and also potentially risking a return to new elections? And is that something that the electorate would forgive them for?
Do you think that the German electorate is still behind Angela Merkel?
Well, her approval ratings are extremely high, 64%, even though I will not deny that the issue of migration is a very important question in Germany, and I think it's going to shape German politics for decades to come. And nonetheless, she, in 2015, let in 1 million refugees and refugee and asylum seekers. This is not legal immigration we're talking about. This is completely different from free movement or anything of the sort. And she won a 4th term after that. I mean, that's astounding. That would not happen in any other European country or Western country that I can think of.
But you can sense what is happening across Europe, and you know that now individual countries, whether it's Italy, Malta, they're all acting in a unilateral way. That's going to be the future now for immigration, isn't it?
Absolutely. I've always said that I think the migration issue is the issue that could tear apart the EU. I've never seen such big divisions when it comes to the EU, not even at the height of the Eurozone crisis. So what Merkel is really pushing for here is that she sees this not as an issue of her own personal legacy, but indeed an issue for the legacy of Europe. If each of the countries are to shut down their borders and pursue national interest, then she's afraid that the entire project could come tumbling down.
Nina Schick, very nice to have you here. Thank you.